To the Budget Subcommittee number 2, we are dealing with several items today. Please call the roll. Let's establish a quorum.
Senators Wolk,
Here?
Nielsen,
Here.
Pavley,
All right, we do have our quorum. We'll begin first with the Department of Water Resources. We have a vote only, I think we'll hold on that for a moment. Yes, until we have a full, well, no.
I'm going to flood management and just come back.
True. All right, we have Department of Water Resources. Let's do the vote only calendar. We have several items in front of us, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I will first, we will have a split vote. The first, I will make the motion for a item 1 and the San Joaquin River restoration of Part 2.
I'd move on.
All right.
One, and that'd be a no vote.
All right. And on item 2?
I would move on item 2 and be an aye.
All right, then let's start again. All right. The Vice Chair has moved.
Item 2 is a no.
Was a no. Okay. All right. So your motion is on item 1 that we approve the Riverine Stewardship Technical Assistance. That's the motion? All right. Please call the roll.
Senators Wolk,
Aye.
Senator Nielsen,
No.
Senator Pavley,
All right. We'll leave the roll open. And now there was a motion on the San Joaquin.
And item number 2,
I will move that. No, I can't? You can, all right. But you're going to vote no. We can hold that.
yeah, this is San Joaquin.
We can wait till we have a full complement, if you like. All right. Okay. And we'll do the same with the others, Jim. All right. And then it'll be easier to do, I think. All right. We'll come back to vote only items in a moment. Let's go with issue 1, flood management and general fund restoration. Welcome, Mr. Cowan. Good to see you. You must be happy there's more rain and no floods so far. So far. All right. Oh, here we go. Welcome. Yes.
Well, good morning, Chair Wolk, Senator Nielsen. I'm Mark Cowan, Director of the California Department of Water Resources. The first agenda item today actually incorporates 4 of the department's budget proposals. So at your discretion, I'll give you a brief description of all 4 of those.
Start with the first.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, definitely.
The first part of issue 1 is general fund restoration. This is a request for $11.5 million to restore funding for 3 flood management programs that were previously supported by general fund, but cut in 2011 during the state's fiscal crisis. Of that $11.5 million, $10.1 million is for flood systems operation and maintenance, $900,000 for flood emergency response, and $500,000 for flood risk reduction. I believe that there's broad agreement that we've made great strides in improving our flood control system in the past decade, and particularly since 2007 and passage of Propositions 1 and 84. We've made some essential improvements to our flood systems, but we obviously need consistent and continuous funding for the operation and maintenance of those systems to avoid losing the gains we've made. And this proposal essentially would restore the funding necessary to keep those activities going.
Indeed. Are there any questions from the committee on those on issue number 1, the flood and hydrograph budget requests? The recommendation is to approve. All right, it has been moved. The approval for 4 items in issue 1, the general fund restoration, increased flood protection using bond funds, the national hydrography,
Tenth.
data set and stream gauges, and deferred maintenance. The motion has been made to approve.
So moved.
All right, it's been moved by the vice chair. Please call the roll.
That's the vice chair.
Yes,
Oh, he made.
he made the motion.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So please call the roll.
Senators Wolk,
Here's that.
Oh, public comment. Necessary on these? Okay. We do need to hear if there's any public comment before we vote. Come forward.
Robert Gore from the Guelco Group on behalf of Safeco. We're in strong support of items 1 and 2 and associate ourselves with the director's remarks. Thanks.
All right, good. Any further comments? Yes.
Good morning, Rachel.
Yes,
Ehlers,
hello.
LAO. We agree that all of these proposals are reasonable and would help improve the state's flood protection. With regard to the deferred maintenance in particular, it's $100 million in general fund for levee maintenance. It's part of a larger proposal, $500 million across the budget for various deferred maintenance items, about nearly 200 in resources areas. We think this is an important area to focus on, but we've raised some concerns about the governor's specific approach with regard to deferred maintenance, and there's some limited opportunities for legislative review and oversight kind of globally across all of these. The DWR proposal is a little better in that you've gotten some more information about what specific projects they plan to prioritize, how they plan to allocate the money. But we would recommend that you put that in the supplemental reporting language of the budget just so that it is documented formally and has formal legislative approval of specifically how those funds would be spent, and then require them to come back through the JLBC if there are going to be changes for that, just so that the legislature is involved in making the decision of how the funds will be used and being aware of how they'll be used.
I think that's what the vice chair had in mind.
I think that would be excellent.
Yes, I thought so. So let that be the case.
Good idea.
And that has been moved, and please call the roll.
Senators Wolk,
Aye.
Senator Nielsen, Senator Pavley,
Aye.
3-0.
All right. I'm going to go back to the vote-only items. Now that we have a full complement, there will be some split votes. So there is one, excuse me, there are 4 items.
Page 3?
Page 3.
There you go.
And I think, before we do that, is there any public comment on any one of those items?
On page 3.
Page 3. Seeing none, we started this prior to your arrival. Let's open the roll on item number 1, which is the Riverine Stewardship Technical Assistance. That has been moved. Please call the roll. The absent members.
Wolk, aye. Nielsen, no. Pavley,
Aye.
All right, that item is approved 2-1. Now then, we'll vote on item number 2. We'll split that. We have the San Joaquin River Restoration. I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Been moved by Senator Pavley. Please call the roll.
Senators Wolk,
Aye?
Senator Nielsen, no. Senator Pavley,
All right, that passes 2-1. Now then, the next item would be the Truckee River Operating Agreement plus number 3 and number 4.
That was split. Got it.
So is there, all right, it's been moved by Senator Nielsen, and please call the roll.
Senators Wolk,
Aye.
Senator Nielsen,
Aye.
Senator Pavley, 3-0.
3-0. All right, and I just want to make a comment, very brief, about the water loss audit program, which is about the bill that was passed, 7555, my bill. Just one more effort to increase our water supply, an easy way, we hope. Close to 1 million acre-feet has been projected by the CPUC. I hope that materializes, as well as 1 billion kilowatt hours estimated in the PUC study. So move forward. That's a good thing. Hope that happens. All right, now, issue number 2, Mr. Cowan, drought emergency response.
This is a request for $64 million to support our continuing drought emergency response actions. Of that $64 million, $42 million would be set aside for removal of a drought emergency salinity barrier this year and installation of a barrier in 2017 should drought conditions continue. $17 million would be to support our other broader drought response activities, including $5 million for our Save Our Water program, our public education program, and $5 million for local assistance to assist disadvantaged communities with their critical emergency water supply needs. Just a very brief update on drought conditions. I believe we provided the committee with a one-pager which gives you the up-to-date statistics. Most telling, I believe, is this map that describes precipitation to date, and the blue, purple colors being above average and the red, yellow, orange colors being below average. This very much tells the story of this year. We've had average or above average precipitation and snowpack in the northern part of the state, but as you move south, drought conditions have very much persisted. So we find ourselves with, on a statewide basis, concerns that drought will prevail and continue into next year. There are some bright spots, obviously. Our Northern California reservoirs are expected to fill or come close to filling by the end of spring, so that alleviates a lot of the concerns about drought conditions in the Sacramento Valley, and also relieves our concerns about salinity in the Delta for this summer. So clearly, we will not need to install a salinity barrier this year. We, of course, can't tell what's going to happen the next winter, and we may need to reserve funding to install a barrier in 2017 should next winter be lacking in precipitation. But knowing what we know now, our intention is to bring you back a revised proposal that does not include funding for installation of a barrier for this year.
That's a good thing. It's a good thing. All right, questions from the committee?
I just had one comment on that map and representing Ventura and LA County. We spent all fall on El Nino hearings,
Right.
but never quite. We're really prepared for floods right now, but to no avail. So it's going to be a real challenge, but particularly I wanted to make note of the western half of Ventura County and Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo County. They're not tied into Sierra snowpack. They're based on groundwater, and some of them are in critically overdraft basins. Reservoirs for their drinking water with Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara, or up in San Luis Obispo County, they're less than a fourth filled or less than a third filled. There aren't a lot of Plan Bs, and they're particularly, so those of us who have some tie into the Sierra snowpack have a buffer other than concern about wildfires and things like that in Southern California after 5 years of record drought down there with dead trees everywhere. I'm very concerned about the Central Coast that didn't get adequate rainfall yet again, and what our plans are to deal with that. You can't build a desal plant overnight. Rolling money out the door, additional money for recycling programs, argumentatively, maybe should go into some of those areas that don't have that buffer of having to have some Sierra snow this year to balance their water needs. So we're going to have a challenge, particularly in some focused areas.
Okay.
I have a question about the water transfers. To what extent water transfers do you think, given the current water picture, will be needed in the coming budget year?
Well, it's a precarious position we're in right now, actually. We've had just enough precipitation that we expect that the projects will be operating their pumps at regulated capacity essentially through the summer for project deliveries. So at this point, we're projecting no capacity essentially for additional north to south transfers through the Delta. That will be subject to confirmation as we crank the numbers from the April 1 snowpack, but we're right on the bubble right now of not having any capacity really to move significant amounts of water north to south.
I also find in the map that you gave us that the central, it's not central, but it's the lower northern portion that's
Right.
Yellow and orange. Given all the green, deep green around, it's very strange. I mean, I think that's not a classic
You would think it would
pattern.
go west to east,
You'd think.
you know.
Right,
especially
I
with the
think
green
it's
below.
Essentially a rain shadow effect, and we did have some of that atmospheric river effect this winter with a few of the storms that really directed straight at the Feather River corridor and further north, of course, but just an oddity of the precipitation patterns this year and the particular storms we received.
I think it's a good argument for the necessity for resilience and being able to be flexible, and whether it's on storage or whether it's on transferring. I mean, just, it's the new, I don't know how much of a new era it is, but it sure feels that way.
Well, I completely concur, and our plans moving forward and implementing the governor's California Water Action Plan really need to get at being able to endure longer, harsher droughts. So all in all, I believe California has done reasonably well, with the exception of some communities throughout the state, based upon the investments made since the last drought. But we have to be prepared for longer, more severe conditions, and that means continued investment.
I had one question.
Yes, go ahead.
It's been brought to attention in several newspaper articles. I think the New York Times covers our drought more than anyone else, and National Geographic is coming out next week out here with a major story they're doing on California, and it's called Parched. But something's been brought to light that was alarming to me that was in the New York Times. In Arizona, as well as the Imperial Valley in California, Saudi Arabia, I don't know if it's the government or businesses, are buying up water rights because it is so easy then to obtain water. They're growing, not only do they own the water rights, and this could apply to China too, they're usually growing alfalfa in order to ship it to their countries for beef, because they have droughts, and they have strict prohibition of growing crops that are intensive for water. Right. They're coming over into the United States, Arizona, and Southern California, and buying up water rights. So maybe you have a comment on that? Is this something that technically and legally foreign countries can come in, and essentially you talk about being held economically hostage? This could be the worst case scenario. We protect water rights at all costs, but is there some protection on who can come in and buy them all out from under us, grow whatever they want, deplete everyone else's groundwater basins, and then turn around and use it overseas where they're not allowed to do that?
Well, I'm no expert on trade regulations, so I couldn't comment on whether or not what they're doing is compatible with those laws and regulations. Certainly from a water rights perspective, I'm not aware that they've violated anything in terms of California statute. Maybe that's a question for Tom Howard later. But to the extent that they have exercised their water rights and exported a crop as a result of that, it's alarming. It certainly causes public policy concerns, but I'm not aware of anything illegal that is incurred as a result of those actions.
Well, our valued water rights policies could come back to haunt us if there aren't some, perhaps, criteria or ways to make sure that it isn't totally bought up.
Understood.
Could be. They could do that during years of drought. Property owners are all too willing. They've followed their fields to sell to the highest bidder. Money doesn't seem to be an object, but these kind of practices are prohibited in their own countries.
Very interesting.
I think that really calls for,
You should be angry about that.
well, as soon as they come up to your part of the world, you will be angry about it.
Well, it is indeed a concern, but it's a problem beyond the ability of the state of California to deal with. What is with our capability, though, is to deal with the water rights that applies to the people of the state of California. And, that's a delicate issue that we are dealing with now, and we've done a lot to be helpful in those water rights. Now, there's some unsettling things that have occurred pursuant to the drought legislation that passed here a couple of years ago, but so far it appears the Water Board has tried to handle them as responsibly as they could. But we have to be wary about our water rights for the California water rights holders back to pre-1914 even right now. So that's an issue for our own water rights holders.
Just to add a little comment about this, I mean, it seems to me that what really is the key here and what really is of concern is our ability to control and to regulate basins and water use so that no matter who the owner is, that there isn't an effort to deplete what is a valuable resource that belongs to the people of the state of California because of misuse, overuse, pollution. I mean, there are a lot of reasons one might do that, and one might have this problem. And it doesn't really matter who the owner is, frankly. But it's in, your Department of Water Resources. I mean, you have to protect them. So the first step, it seems to me, it doesn't matter so much what the ownership is. That just that highlights the concern. But the real issue is how we regulate, control, support, protect a good water source, our water source.
And just a comment, certainly as the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is developed and implemented, foreign entities, everyone will be subject to the rules and requirements to sustainably manage groundwater, which in turn leads to sustainable management of all of our water resources. So I do see help down the road. The question is, what do we do between now and the time that SGMA is truly implemented?
No, I have a bill.
Okay.
I can't resist, but there is some irony that we're spending more and more money from Prop 1 or Prop 50 and hauling down water to environmental justice communities, and that somehow it's technically legally possible for people from other countries to come in, own water rights, deplete them, and grow crops for sale overseas. And we're backfilling, right? This potential mismanagement, or if water is a scarce resource, we're really hurting our own property owners and farmers that need access to that water.
I see another bill in the making.
Sounds like a federal issue.
Thank you, Madam
Comments
Chair.
from the
Yes, just a few comments on the budget proposals. Generally, we concur that the proposals make sense and will be necessary with the exception of that salinity barrier, which is actually the largest ticket item. In addition, as is noted in your agenda, we published this comprehensive report on the state's drought response back in early February, and in it we had some recommendations beyond just the specific governor's budget proposals around how the state can prepare for future droughts and not to lose this opportunity to identify additional policies that maybe we can put in place now to help in future droughts, to identify activities that have been funded on short-term basis that maybe should be ongoing, things like monitoring fish or some of the attention to dry wells in the Central Valley that may need ongoing resources for multiple years. And specifically, we had two recommendations for reports that we would suggest you may want to consider requiring from the administration. First, an update on measurable outcomes from the drought expenditures over the past 3 years. You did ask for two of these types of reports in last year's budget and got some initial information, but we think making that ongoing, at least for the next few years, to understand how the $3.1 billion already spent in drought packages have been used and what outcomes have been forthcoming from those expenditures, particularly around the Prop 1 funds in the most recent budget. The second report we'd recommend requiring is, as we begin to emerge from this drought, whether it's in the coming year or takes a little bit longer, a compilation and comprehensive report on lessons learned from this drought across the administration and across different departments. We know there will be staff turnover. We hope there will be staff turnover before the next drought, because we hope the next drought will be long enough away from now. But to get that information documented and what surprised us, what worked well, things like temperature management in rivers, things like responding to dry residential wells, which was really unprecedented in the levels that we saw this year. Suggestions of policy changes we might need to make, just so that the state is not starting from scratch next time. We know science suggests that droughts will be more frequent and intense in the future. So what can we learn and what can we make sure that we put in place now?
I think those are good suggestions, and we aren't going to take action on this particular item now, but when we do take action, if the staff would include those recommendations, they're good ones if the committee agrees. Yeah. looking for update on measurable outcomes as well as lessons learned. Always good to learn from what we do. All right, further questions on
Madam Chair, I believe that that is very important. We did accord extraordinary powers to the governor under emergency declaration and to the board. And it's well along the line now to assess what those extraordinary powers have resulted in.
All right, let's move on to issue number 3, which is greenhouse gas emissions program. Again, the recommendation is to hold open, but let's have some discussion of these items. Would you like to, Mr. Cowan?
This is a request for $10 million of greenhouse gas reduction funds for grants that would reduce water use and also provide measurable reduction in carbon emissions associated with that water use. This appropriation we propose to roll into our 2015-16 program that has $19 million appropriated in last year's budget, so we'd have a total of $29 million for a grant cycle this year. We are in the process of producing a consolidated guidelines and proposal solicitation package that will incorporate the Air Resources Board's quantification methodology, which I believe has been important to this committee. And in response to the comments we've received and our experience with this type of program, we intend to shift our focus from residential water use towards commercial and industrial projects that save water and reduce energy and greenhouse gas emissions. That's our general intent.
All right, I have a couple questions. Does the committee have any questions of Mr. Cowan
One
on
short
this?
comment, whenever you.
Go ahead.
It's just a comment, Director Cowan. If you could be of assistance when awarding these grants before they become public, calling or contacting the legislature whose district it is. I notice in 18 Bakersfield parks, I would bet that assembly member or senator has no idea that their district is benefiting from the expenditure of auction revenue for water conservation and energy conservation purposes. It's incredibly important because I hear it all the time. So where is that auction revenue? Nothing's coming to my district. That's what they say. So that it's been inconsistent how the administration rolls out their grants, and some people are sort of understanding that that would be not only a good thing to do, but it would be a smart thing to do in order to have people support continued expenditures of these kinds of programs, but they don't know about them. And they should own them and be part of the rolling out of whatever the project is, not interfering with who you select for grants. Certainly. But that's, before it's announced, let them know.
No. These are good
I
things.
understand completely.
Go down for a ribbon cutting with them.
We have made a practice of notifying members' offices before making any grant awards, but we will endeavor to make sure it's highlighted, particularly in this program moving forward.
Or maybe they want to be part of the statement in a joint press release or whatever. Leave it up to your judgment.
Senator Nielsen.
Dr. Cowan, how can we justify proceeding with the barriers now when we have the very substantial additional flows? Doesn't that indicate that maybe we don't need to do the barriers now?
Right. We do not need to do a barrier this year. So on the last budget proposal that you all held open, our intent is to bring back a revised budget proposal that does not include funding for installation of a barrier this year.
I have a question about the installation of water meters for Merced. I'm delighted that they're going to be metered. But how does that reduce GHG?
Want to take it, Art? I will ask Art Hinojosa from the department to take a crack at responding to that, since he's more familiar with the program than I am.
The concept is that as folks are more aware of the water they're using, they will use less for all purposes, including their hot water use. If they realize they're inefficient with their laundry and their dishwashing, that's unclear until you have a meter. With the meter, you know that's happening. You use less water, therefore you use less energy, therefore less greenhouse gas. It's not the highest efficient means of reducing greenhouse gas, which is why we're focusing more on a commercial industrial going forward with the next grant.
All right, I'm curious why the ratepayers haven't been responsible for the installation of water meters. Don't we have thought we had a regulation that everybody had to be metered?
Yeah, why do some
why-
ratepayers have to
yeah.
pay most of the state and others in some areas don't?
Well, that's a great question and gets to how we finance water in general, which is always a combination of ratepayers with some state assistance in certain programs. And I will admit that I don't have a good sense of how we choose as a government to decide where we provide state assistance and where we don't. But we follow the rules of the bond programs that the voters vote on, essentially. In this case, yes, it's my understanding that we do have statutes in place that require metered water use. My guess is that this program speeds up the timeline so that they install the meters more quickly than they would have to under the statute.
Okay. And I wanted to ask about the Tulare County issues, East Porterville and Alpau in particular, pretty hard hit during the drought. What has been done here?
Well, there has been a lot of issues in East Porterville in particular. Tulare County in general is suffering quite a bit. The department, the Water Resources Control Board, and Cal OES have been working together for the last couple of years with Tulare County and the city of Porterville to establish a long-term fix for the residents of East Porterville, which is an unannexed within the zone of influence part of the city of Porterville. We've been meeting with them regularly. There was a city council meeting on Tuesday night where the city council voted to go forward and for lack of a better term, authorize what the department, the OES and the board is proposing. The department is looking to build the infrastructure necessary to hook the community up to the existing city's water distribution system. Most of the folks are on very shallow wells. Many of those wells have gone dry. A lot of them are on tanks and getting water distributed to them. A lot of them are receiving bottled water as well. And our hope is within the next, well, as soon as can, we'll start phasing in folks, getting them hooked up. Some are closer to main lines already, and we're looking to expedite getting them hooked up to the main lines. And then we're looking to build the infrastructure, extending those main lines. We're also we've installed a new well to serve that we'll be turning over to the county, and then who's going to turn it over to the city. And there's also agreements to provide OES with resources in the event that more shortages are needed and OES needs to provide more water. There's guarantees that the city will help with that as well.
Very good. So Proposition 1 money then has come into play here?
From the board side, yes, I believe they are using some Prop 1, but I'm not exactly, there's a mixture of programs that the state board is utilizing. We're utilizing some of the very type of money that we're asking for here for local assistance.
All right. Thank you for the responses. Elio?
Yep. So our comments are consistent with what we presented at your full budget committee on the cap and trade issue. Generally that you don't have a lot of information about the proposed projects in most of the proposed projects in the governor's package about what the benefits will be. That's certainly true here where it appears to be a continuation of an existing program, but as the department has indicated, they're shifting gears to focus on different sectors. So you really don't have a lot of evidence about the effect this will have on reducing greenhouse gases. So it probably should be viewed as a pilot project if you want to pursue it. And as such, if you want to pursue this project, you really should be sure that you're getting information to be able to evaluate it in the future of what the actual benefits are and whether this is a worthwhile place to spend these dollars. But our overarching comments have been that you build a package based on legislative priorities, probably try and focus primarily on efforts for which you have some information about benefits, and then to the degree you want to include some projects that are more pilot and uncertain to be sure that you get the information you need to proceed in the future with projects you know achieve the outcomes that you're hoping for.
All right. Again, good suggestions. We're holding this item open. There's something that can be incorporated